So thank you very much for tuning in. Today we are doing EC201 microeconomics and EC202 macroeconomics. They're both the same chapter in the book. We're going to do chapter 3, supply and demand analysis. Now this may be a review for some of you. Be careful. There are some deviations and new material I put in here to try to help you versus what is in the textbook. So in any economic model, the first thing you have to do is create what we call the agents or economic actors. The first is obvious, and those are firms. Firms take our inputs, land, labor, capital, mix them together in some form, and make outputs. Now, households, and we tend to use households rather than people, generally buy what firms make, and in exchange work for firms to get money to buy things. Not, there's other ways. They also own capital that they rent or sell to firms as well. As is required with all business text, here's, yes, entrepreneurs start businesses, Yago team. This is your requisite entrepreneurial reference for the term. Now, generally speaking, there are two markets, and it's important to keep these straight. In microeconomics, it's very difficult sometimes to keep in your head which one is which, but also in macroeconomics, when you're trying to deal with a situation, you have to keep these straight in your head. The first is a product or an output market. These are very simple. Starbucks coffee, that's an output market. The grocery store, going to the mall. You go, you buy, you want something, you give them money, they give you the product. So in a product or output market, households are generally the demanders. They're the consumer units. They're on the demand side of the equation. Firms generally supply to the output market. So when I go for coffee, Starbucks supplies the coffee and I demand the coffee. And let's be honest, when I go to Starbucks, when I'm pre-caffeinated, I am pretty demanding. But everything gets flipped around for the input or factor markets. In the input markets, firms are demanders. Firms demand inputs. Starbucks demanded labor this morning in order for somebody to make my coffee. Starbucks demanded water. They needed all the things that they need. They are the demanders for. And by exchange, households, either directly or indirectly, supplied it. Somebody woke up this morning and went to work at Starbucks. Somebody supplied labor to Starbucks, and Starbucks demanded their labor. So here's a nice little circular flow diagram. This morning, I went to the output market. I gave money to Starbucks. Starbucks gave me coffee. Somebody woke up, went to work, and supplied labor to Starbucks. Starbucks paid them money. So this is your circular flow diagram. Goods and services travel clockwise, cash money counterclockwise. Now, importantly, especially in macro, please note whenever you're trying to account for economic activity, if I were to take my pen here and we slice through the circular flow diagram and try to metric everything coming through, there's actually two ways of measuring it. You can measure all of the coffee. Let's switch back to my laser pointer here. You can measure all the value of all the coffee that goes to me, or you can measure how much money I spend in coffee. Those two things are equal. You can measure how much I spend in coffee or how much Starbucks gets in income from me for coffee. Those two are equal. So at any point, there's two separate ways to measure economic activity. And those of you in macroeconomics will be doing a special lecture on that after the first exam. Now, in input markets, you have the labor market. This is where you go to get a job. Now, capital markets, there's a little sleight of hand here. Generally speaking, when we talk about the capital markets, we're talking about the stock and long-term bond markets. And generally, firms use that cash to buy capital goods, but the capital markets are not tools being purchased directly. So yes, there's a little sleight of hand here. Acknowledge. Real estate or land, natural resources is also a market, and hence we have our three key factors of production: land, labor, and capital. Okay, so at this point, draw a line in your notes. So for a while, we're going to focus on the output market. First thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on the demand side of the output market. Now, if you look in your book, you're going to see that this line is not originally here. I drew it in. For those of you who are new to economics, be very careful. Here there be dragons. This tends to be often missed. Now, when we talk about how much a household demands of any given item, there's a lot of things that matter. But the first and foremost is how much does whatever the household's interested in cost? So in economics, there's this complete set of language centered around this: changes in the price. There's another set of language that talks about everything else. I'll walk you through it, but be careful. What tends to happen here is a change in demand is different than a change in quantity demanded. The use of quantity demanded is for this up here. And the change in demand accounts for everything else. And we'll go through these one by one. So the phrase quantity demanded, this is the amount of units you can buy at a given period if it could buy all it wanted at the price. Ceteris paribus, nothing else is allowed to change. So if you change price, you're going to change the quantity demanded. But you are not allowed to change anything else below the line on the list: the income, your wealth, prices of other products, tastes, preferences, expectations. Nothing else is allowed to change. So here we go. Here's a graph. On the x-axis, we have the quantity of video games. On the y-axis, we have the price of video games. So generally, as video games get cheaper, you tend to buy more. So at the price of $20 in this market, 10 video games are purchased. But at a price of $10, you read it off the graph, you come across by $10 till you bump into the line, then you go down, 30 video games are purchased. And this gives us the law of the demand. There's a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded, ceteris paribus. As price rises, quantity demanded decreases. As price falls, quantity demanded increases. But remember, this is key, ceteris paribus. Everything else has to be the same. Now, it was winter of 2020. We had a special guest in one of my upper division economics courses over at Western. And we were talking about it was somebody from Fisheries and Wildlife. And they were talking about fishing permits, I believe. And he was showing up the graph of all the prices that they charged over years and what the demand was. And there was one year where the price went up and demand went up. Quantity demanded went up. And it looked like it was a violation of the law of demand, but it wasn't. What happened was this. Everything else wasn't remaining constant. They changed advertising, and they actually started advertising for certain things. And that led to the change. There is one exception to the law of demand. It's called Giffin's paradox. For those of you in micro, we'll cover it in chapter 6. But it's only happened once. We haven't seen it since. And Giffin's paradox is a bit controversial anyway. You can make an argument against Giffin's paradox, but generally speaking, the law of demand holds up really well. As a result of the negative relationships, demand curves have a negative slope. They slope downward. If you see something that slopes upward, here's a hint, that's not a demand curve. So here's an equation. This is an inverse demand equation. Because price is on the y-axis, I put price is equal to sum, letter A, this is a number, we don't know what it is yet, minus B. Why is it minus? Because it's a downward sloping demand curve times quantity. So that negative slope in that equation, the second I see that negative, I know this is going to be a demand curve. Now A is the y-intercept, which I called out here on the graph, is the y-intercept of the graph. In this case, it's 25. More on A in a minute. So the slope is rise over run. In this case, rise is price, so it's change in price over change in quantity. So we go down $10, that's negative 10, and then positive 20. Minus 10 over divided by positive 20 is equal to negative 1/2. There's our negative that we expect. So if you decrease the price, if the price goes from $20 to $10, ceteris paribus, people will buy more video games. Or we would say there was an increase in the quantity demanded. So because it's a price change, we would move along the existing demand curve to the right to the new point. Now be careful. We'll say this is an increase in quantity demanded. Well, Professor Yoder, you're moving down the graph. Why do you call it an increase? Well, remember, it's an increase in quantity. Quantity is not an up-down thing. It's a left-right. So we went from 10 to 30 because we moved to the right. That's an increase in quantity. Inversely, if you increase the price, if we go from 10 to 20, people will buy fewer video games. This is a decrease in quantity demanded. Again, we're moving to the left. So if you ever change the price of a product that you're analyzing, ceteris paribus, you will move up or down along an existing demand curve. We would say that there is a change in quantity demanded brought about by the price. Change the price, you'll see the language movement along a demand curve or a change in quantity. Careful of that adjective, quantity demanded. Now, if you change anything other than the price of the product that is demand related, you will blow away the old demand curve and generate a new one. We call these shifts in demand. Here's how these work. So here's our equation before. Anything else that you change, income, prices of other goods, tastes and preferences, anything else is buried in this A term. So what happens, it will cause a shift. Let me show you how that works. For example, if you make more money for a normal good, notice the y-intercept increased. This shifted this old demand curve to the right. The old line goes away, we have a new line. Now notice the new line is parallel. It really didn't rotate. This is called an increase in demand. What happened? Something changed up here in the y-intercept term, and we went from an old y-intercept to 25 all the way up here to 35. That's it. In this case, you had more money. That's an increase in income. You got to pay a raise. So at every price along the line, you demand more. So an increase in demand shifts the demand curve. It blows away the old one, generates a new one, up or to the right. How does it do it? Changes that y-intercept term. Changes the y-intercept term. Inverse is also true. Let's say your pay gets cut. This will shift the demand curve to the left. Old was 25, now it's 15. Notice a new line is drawn. This is called a decrease of demand. Notice before, when we only changed price, there was an adjective here. It would be a decrease in quantity demanded. But now that we're changing income, it shifts the demand curve to the left. Because it shifts, the entire demand relationship changed. We didn't go from one point to another on the demand relationship. We blew it away and made a new one. So a decrease in demand shifts the demand curve down and to the left by changing the y-intercept term. Okay. So we need to unpack this A and go through A pretty seriously. So the first thing we're going to put in here is income. Income is one thing included in A. Be careful though, income does not play nicely with others. So here's our intercept term A, and we're going to add income. And I'm going to build you a little equation for A. Now this beta naught, these are Greek letters. Greek letters are estimatable parameters to economists. This means we could take some statistical software, collect some data, and figure out what it is. But understand beta naught is just the relationship between income and the demand for the item. So what happens? There are two types of goods. If it's a normal good, most goods are normal goods, beta naught is a positive number. But if it's an inferior good, an inferior doesn't mean bad, more on inferior in a minute. This beta naught will be a negative number. It'll have an inverse relationship. So normal goods, this is easy. Starbucks coffee. If my paycheck went up and I make more money, I may go to Starbucks every day instead of just the days I teach. Or if I lose income and my pay goes down, instead of going on the days I teach, I might only go 2 or 3 days a week. That's a normal good. So notice we're not talking about the price of Starbucks coffee. All we're talking about is my income and whether or not I go more frequently or less frequently. So what happens? If it's a normal good and you increase your income, demand curve shifts to the right. If it's an inferior or a normal good and your income goes down, demand curve shifts to the left. Here's an example of inferior goods. When I was a college student, I practically lived off these things. Now that I am not a college student and I actually have decent income, I don't want to eat these. So for inferior goods, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that it has an inverse relationship between the demand and income. So if you make less money, you tend to buy more. If I lost my job and I didn't have income, and I was really scrapping, yeah, I might end up buying and eating a lot of ramen noodles. But as I've made more, I tend to buy less. If you make more money, you buy less. If you make less money, you tend to buy more. These are inferior goods. Just means they have an inverse relationship to income. Okay. So in order to know which way a change in income is going to affect something, you have to know whether the good is normal or inferior. Now, for those of you in macro, remember, income is not just a person. It's also GDP of a country. And so if you're looking at a chain, some product, and you're looking at something like exports or imports, you have to look at the GDP of the country. But first, you need to know if the good is normal or inferior that you're analyzing. So let's talk about inferior goods. Inferior goods have some weird attributes. Number one, normal versus inferior goods is in the eye of the beholder. Can be. So I have two children, the spawn of Sean. Mercifully, they're not in the room right now. They know I tell this story, and it's totally true. But they get a little nervous whenever I tell the story. For years, if I took my kids to the grocery store and I gave them carte blanche, they could go buy steak, lobster, whatever they wanted for dinner. They would go and they would buy large quantities of macaroni and chemicals. Seriously, it is macaroni and chemicals. I know how to spell cheese. I know how to spell milk. I have looked at the boxes. It is not macaroni and cheese. It is macaroni and large quantities of unpronounceable chemicals. You need a degree in chemistry in order to read the bloody box. I cannot read the bloody box. That is not macaroni and cheese. That is macaroni and chemicals. Now, for me, macaroni and chemicals are clearly an inferior good. Oh, hell no. But for my kids, that's a normal good. Normal versus inferior goods is in the eye of the beholder. Number two, normal versus inferior goods can be culturally determined. Here is a sweet potato, sorry. I forget, I'm back in the United States. And these are very common around the Thanksgiving time, and for some people, it's a normal good. But in some places of Southeast Asia, this would be considered so inferior you would only do it if you were on death's door, if you were about to die of starvation. The equivalent would be eating dog food in the United States. You wouldn't do it. Another example, in the southeast of the United States, they have a culinary item called grits. It's a kind of a cornmeal, I believe, that they eat somewhat like oatmeal, but it's really very different. They like to put butter on it. Whereas I found here in this part of the country, in the Northwest, grits are generally considered an inferior good. They frequently get donated to food pantries because nobody wants them. Normal versus inferior goods can be culturally determined. Yeah. Normal versus inferior goods can change over time. Back in the 1800s, lobster, which is now a normal good, was only suitable for slaves. It was inferior good. You'd only eat it if you were really, really, really poor or slave. So realize the properties of inferior goods can change, and sometimes it's per person, sometimes it's not. But I want you to think about businesses for a second. So let's take this idea of an inferior good and let's extrapolate this. Here in Salem, we've got stores called Dollar Tree or Dollar General. So think about it for a second. If everybody in the Salem area was suddenly making $100,000 a year of income, what do you think would happen to sales at Dollar Tree or Dollar General? Would they go up or down? Probably go down. And if everybody in the Salem area was suddenly making $20,000 a year, or on food assistance, what would happen to sales at Dollar Tree or Dollar General? Probably go up. So notice businesses sometimes specialize in inferior goods, and the nature of their business can be that. Same with industries. Same with industries. So if you lose income and it's an inferior good, this increases demand, shifts to the right. If you get more income and it's an inferior good, this will decrease the demand for an inferior good, and it will shift it to the left. So sometimes to know whether a good is normal or inferior, you need to ask the individual person in question. I remember years ago, the Chevrolet Corporation had this car that was selling great in the United States and Canada. It was doing wonderfully. And they said, hey, let's go sell it in Mexico. So they hired an advertising firm, and I still want to know who this firm was that took their money. They must have been laughing. So they hired this advertising firm. Chevrolet dumped tons of money, distribution chain, had all these cars all over Mexico, right? And they couldn't sell them. Couldn't sell them at all. Why? The vehicle was named Chevy Nova. And Nova in Spanish means it doesn't go. Chevy, it doesn't go. So it's like buying a car named Brick or doesn't run. Now, if they had gone and asked down in Mexico, you don't buy a Chevy Nova, a car named it doesn't run unless that's the only car you can afford. Now, had the Chevrolet Corporation gone down there and actually done their market research before they dumped a bunch of money in it, they probably would have figured out that was a bad idea. So, prices of related goods. So here we have video games. Prices of something else is also included today. So it's not the price of video games, it's the price of other things. Be careful it doesn't play nicely. So here we go. We're interested in the price of X. So this is the price of Y. Beta 1 is the relationship between the price of something else and the demand we're interested in. This also comes in two flavors. Complements, things that go together, that would make beta 1 a negative number. Substitutes would make beta 1 a positive number. Let me give you some examples. So whenever my birthday or Christmas came around and I got these cards from Grandma, I'd always open the card, but I would open the card, facing down and just wait for the magical sheet of paper to flutter to the ground, right? So imagine your birthday came, you opened the card, and you saw the magical sheet. And in it was a check for $500. And you wanted to get a PS4 and some games. PS4 at the time was running $300, and games were about $50 each. So with your check, you could buy your PS4 and you could get 4 games. Now we're interested here in video games. If the price of the PS4 went up to $400, notice the price of the video games didn't change. You'd only get 2 games. Or if the price of the PS4 went down to $200, you would be getting 6 games. So notice how many games you buy became a function of how much the price of the PS4 was. These are complements, things that go together. Hamburgers and hamburger buns, peanut butter and jelly, right? Cell phones and cell phone cases. We can go on and on. These are things that go together. So if the price of a complement, that's an E, not an I, the price of a complement goes down, it increases your demand, shifts your demand curve to the right. Increase the price of the complement, it decreases demand, demand curve shifts to the left. Substitutes are things that replace each other. So imagine it's exam day, and we're in person, and it's not a Scantron, so you don't need the mighty number 2 lead. It's exam day, you come early, you sit down, you're ready to go, you got your note cards, you got everything you need, except you're looking for your pen or your pencil. Can't find it. You look through your purse or your book bag, And you know the bowels of the bag where you never look unless it's an emergency or about to decommission the bag, and where all the weird, wonderful stuff is, you know, the leftover stick of chewing gum that never got chewed, the paper clips, the odd coin or two. You're searching down there for an emergency pen. Can't find it. Oh, man. You hit up your neighbors. You're like, hey, do you have a spare? And they're like, no, dude, sorry. Come up to see me. No, sorry, I didn't bring any. And a level of existential panic slowly sets in. And finally it dawns on you, hey, wait a minute. I can go get some at the bookstore. You look at the clock, you have just enough time. You get up out of your seat and you bolt out through the door to the bookstore. I don't want to say you were fast, but the flash had nothing on you. The carpet was smoking from where you ran. You get into the bookstore, out of the way, emergency. You know, people are diving out of the way as you're bolting through, right? And you get there. Pencils cost their normal price, and pens are $20 each. Which would you buy? Pencils or pens? I would probably buy pencils in that case. By contrast, if I showed up and pencils were their normal price for a pack of pencils and pens were only a penny, I'd probably buy the pens. So notice how much I demand pencils depends on what the price of pens are. If the price of pens go up, I demand more pencils. If the price of pens go down, I demand fewer pencils. Increase the price of the substitute, increases demand. Decrease the price of the substitute, decreases demand. All kinds of examples of this. Driving versus flying for vacations, right? Video game consoles, potentially. Apple versus IBM-based or PC-based computers versus Macintosh computers. Samsung versus iPhone. We can go on and on and on. So remember, the demand for anything you buy is also related to the price of the other things around it. Now, sometimes they are direct substitutes. Sometimes things you wouldn't expect to be a substitute is a substitute. For example, we have noted that toy purchases during Christmas, the Christmas season, are highly a substitute for toys is gasoline. If gasoline prices go up, many families have to buy the gasoline. They spend the money on the gasoline, and where do they cut back? They buy fewer toys at Christmas. And if gasoline prices come down, families tend to buy more toys. You never would have thought that gasoline and toys were substitutes. They are. Now, substitutes represent a continuum. This is really important for those of you in micro. From close substitutes, you know, pens and pencils, to perfect substitutes. So pens and pencils are okay. If you want to get closer to a perfect substitute, you could do a pencil and a mechanical pencil, right? And then you could do different types of wooden pencils, and then finally the same brand or the same type of wooden pencil. So understand, substitutes is not an on-off switch. It's an actual continuum. You must know if a related good is a complement or a substitute to know its effect on a demand curve. A lot of people miss these questions on exams. My tip is, if you're facing a price or related good question, stop and think it through. Is the price working like video game consoles and video games or pens and pencils? How's this actually working? To get it straight in your head to know which one you're looking at. So now we're going to add, so we have income, we have prices of related goods, now we're going to add tastes and preferences. So beta 2 is the relationship between tastes and preferences and the demand for the given question. This could be either positive or negative. This image, this is a 99 in the United Kingdom and Ireland. Very popular. This thing right here is a chocolate flake. These are, I found them, occasionally they sell them up at World Market and Kaiser. They're very popular to take and stir hot chocolate or stir your coffee with, and the flake will slowly melt in your coffee, making it a mocha. It's actually pretty nice. And chocolate from the United Kingdom tastes quite different than chocolate from the United States. So on a hot day, that's pretty nice. That's something that people would like to have. But what if this is your reality? I remember I used to live in Maine. And you know how when you drive by Dairy Queen, they have the little board right outside the shop that says, oh, special Blizzard, mini Blizzard 99 cents, come in for a hot dog. Da, da, da. A lot of times in Maine, they just say closed for the season, see you in the spring. They just gave it up. Giffords ice cream, the same. They just gave it up. Taste and preferences. A lot of brand marketing, etc., is for that. If you have brand damage, your beta 2 may be negative. Recently, I've been seeing, there was a report, it was about 20,000 Amazon workers have COVID, and I suddenly see all these Amazon ads talking about how safe they are and how much their safety protocols are for their workers. Mm-hmm. Recently, there was a company that's kind of trying to come back to life and reinvent itself. For years, whenever I went to go buy a car, I'd walk out into the car lot and I'd look at the branded tires on the car. And if a certain brand of tires were on the car, I'd immediately walk off the lot. I'm done. Wouldn't tell them why, I'd just be gone. What happened is that brand of tires, about 25, 30 years ago, got caught. And there was a paper trail, and the execs knew what they were doing. They deliberately used an inferior glue in their tire. And what was happening is, if you lived in a hot place, think Texas, think parts of Florida, or you were driving on the highway and the friction on the tire was heating up the tire, hotting up the tire, this glue would delaminate or would give out, and the tire would delaminate and your tread would go flying off. And the execs knew that they were doing this. And they got caught, and they got hauled in front of the Congress, and people were dying because of it. And the fact that the execs knew that they were doing this, I swore I would never do business with them again. So nowadays, they've started making car care centers and trying to get into the vehicle, like the oil change business and some of the vehicle maintenance business. But to this day, I will not buy their tires. I will not buy a car from a car that has their tires on it, and I will not do business with a dealership that uses their tires. Nope, thanks, goodbye. They have such a strong negative beta 2 in my mind, I will never do business with them. Doesn't matter what the price is, quantity demanded for me equals 0. I've got a ton of stories, so if we ever have a study hall or you want to talk during office hours about some of these stories, I've got tons of stories of these. Some of them are pretty, pretty gruesome. Beta 3 is wealth. Now, wealth and income are different. So beta 3 is the relationship between wealth and the demand of what you're interested in. Wealth is not income, but you still have the normal inferior good ideas from income that apply here. Most Americans have their wealth in one of two places. In the stock market, usually their retirement accounts, or in their home value. Now, here's how this works. And this blows a lot of macroeconomists, when we finally found this was just amazing. Remember, this is not income. You have no new money to spend. So imagine you graduate and you have a job and you're making $95,000 a year because you were in my class and some other schmoes, right? So you have a decent job, you have a decent income's going good, you're trucking along, you're paying your bills, everything's great. And at the end of the year, you get your 401k statement, your retirement account statement, and you see that your retirement account, the stock market took off, and you have unrealized gains, but you, in your stock market account, your retirement account, it looks like you have a ton of money. What economics has shown is that even though you have no additional income to spend, you will actually spend differently than had you not gotten that statement. How much differently? There are various estimates, but it can be as high as 5%, or excuse me, 3% on the way up. The inverse is also true. You get your statement and your retirement account in the stock market crashed. You still have the same amount of money to spend. The same income, you have the same everything. You tend to spend around 5% less of the crash amount. So if you lost $100,000 in the market, or if the market went down and your account goes down by $100,000, probably in that cycle you're going to spend $5,000 less than you would otherwise. Same is true for your home value. If your home value appreciates, you tend to spend more. If your home value depreciates, you tend to spend less. And it's bigger on the way down, we found, than on the way up. This wealth effect is one weird way the stock market can drive things in places you would not expect. So one of the ways as a professional economist I make money is sometimes businesses or nonprofits have me look over and give them some and consult. And one of my favorite things to do is I'll take their income or their revenue, if they're a nonprofit, their donations and all their money coming in. And then I'll analyze how much of the stock market, usually the S&P 500, accounts for changes in their income. And a lot of businesses are really surprised. You know, a feed store in Dodge City, Kansas, tied to the stock market. The nice thing about that is they can hedge that out. They can figure out ways to basically buy insurance against the stock market crashing and them losing revenue because of it, even though they never really thought that they were tied to the stock market. Then we have beta 4. This is expectations. Beta 4 captures expectations about future wealth, income, prices, and how they change your consumption habits today. Now be careful. Beta 4 is huge. So imagine if you knew that exactly at 6 p.m. today, that was going to be your reality for a gallon of gasoline. What would you be doing at 5:45? All right. Classic answers: filling up my gas tank, buying a gas can, selling my car, buying a bus pass, right? Expectations are so powerful, they can create their own weather. They can overwhelm everything in the system. Let's say we're talking about demand for a Hawaii vacation that you're thinking about going to. If you heard that there's an expectation that your firm is going to be laying off people and you might lose your job, but you expect there's going to be layoffs soon, are you still going to go on vacation, spend all that money? Or are you like, yeah, I think we're good here. I don't think I want to go spend all that money. There's an entire school of macroeconomics devoted to the role of expectations. Like, I got a Nobel for this one. This thing creates its own weather. It can drive school all by itself. Now, market demand is summing the demand for everybody in the market. So here we have three families. We have the Rockefellers, the Yoders, and the Bakers. Each family has their own demand curve. So at a price of $20, the Rockefeller family demands 60 video games a month. Priced at $20, the Yoder family demands 10 video games a month, and the Baker family doesn't demand any. Likewise, at a price of $10, the Rockefeller family demands 100 video games a month. Price of $10, the Yoder family demands 30 video games a month. And at a price of $10, the Baker family demands 10 video games each month. So I just put in here the different prices. This is the Rockefellers, the Yoders, and the Bakers. Here's the different quantity demanded at the different prices for each of the families. And then this just adds them up. So 140 plus 50 plus 30 is 220. And I plotted this quantity total on the graph here. Now you can see it's starting to bend a little bit. That's very common in market demand curves. Now, if the Rockefellers decided I'm too cool for this, I'm going to move away, and the Rockefellers left, this market demand curve would shift to the left or go down. Or if the Carnegies moved in or somebody else moved into the town, that would shift this demand curve to the right. One of the things I like to do, I consult for mutual funds in Europe, and as a result, I listen to a lot of conference calls, especially for retails. When I listen to retail conference calls, a lot of times the CEO or the COO, they'll be talking about where they've opened new stores. And whenever they do that, Professor Yoder's sitting there with a pen and pencil, scribbling down all the towns that they're opening stores in. And then I immediately go to US government census data, and I look at what is their population doing? Are they adding more people, and is the demand curve going to shift to the right and make it easier for the store to meet their sales numbers? Or are they losing population and demand curves are shifting to the left? And whenever I find a retail outlet that's opening stores in places that are losing population, that frequently means that they're running out of good places to expand. And I would get on the phone to the mutual fund manager, and I'd say, hey, you may want to start looking for an exit point if you own this equity. They're starting to open stores in places where growth is going to be harder. They're going to have a harder time making their numbers in the next few years. You might want to start looking at getting out. So, shifting gears, now talking about supply. Remember, in the output markets, firms supply to the output markets. Now, remember, firms are trying to make a profit in general. And profit is the difference between revenue, what they sell it for, and their costs. So just like on the demand side, we have quantity supply. This is the amount of a particular product that a firm would be willing to offer for sale at a particular price if it could sell all it could. I want one thing in your head to be jammed in there hard, okay? Supply curves represent costs of production. Supply curves and costs of production go together. I'll prove it to you in micro for the micro class, but supply curves and costs of production go together. So there's a law of supply. There's a positive relationship between price and the quantity of a good supply, ceteris paribus. An increase in the market price will lead to an increase in quantity of supply. So here is a supply curve. This is for Clarence Brown. I wonder if that's Charlie's cousin. Who knows? So at $1.50 per bushel, Farmer Brown chooses not to supply any soybeans. Oh, joy, soybeans, how wonderful. Well, there's something that's easy to grasp. At $1.75, Farmer Brown supplies 10,000. At $3, Farmer Brown does 30,000. At $4, Farmer Brown does 45,000. Wait a minute. Why is this not going to the right? $5, Farmer Brown's doing 45,000. What happened here? Man, dude's out of dirt. That's what happened. And this is very common, both in micro and macro, especially in the short run. there are times when you just hit productive capacity constraints. In this case, the dude's out of dirt, right? He's used fertilizer, he's used the pesticides, he's used everything he can to try to increase his yield. Dude's out of dirt. Maybe next year he can buy more dirt and can expand, but not this year. Dude's out of dirt. But notice supply curves generally go up and to the right. What shifts a supply curve? I didn't like the way your textbook did this, so I deliberately built this slide. A change in an input cost. So if you are a hamburger maker, let's say you're Red Robin or McDonald's, change in beef prices would shift. That would shift your, if beef prices went up, it would shift your supply curve up or to the left. Change in production technology. This is, think Henry Ford, the assembly line. Using the same number of tools, you're able to get more output. That would shift, if you were able to get more output using the same number of tools, your average costs were going down, so that would shift your supply curve down and to the right. Expectations matter. But this last one, entry and exit of firms. Entry and exit of firms. If firms go out of business, supply curve shifts left. If more firms come into business, supply curve shifts right. So we have movement along the supply curve brought about by a change in price, just normal change in price. You just move along. Shift, everything else. What shifts? Anything on this list. Shift to supply curve. So here we go. Notice here we're going to have a supply shift. Why? Because there's a new seed strain that they're using. We'll call that technology. And here's Farmer Brown. At $1.75, he used to supply 10,000. Now Farmer Brown supplies 23,000. But you can also look at it the other way. Let's say at 30,000, it used to cost $3 per bushel to get 30,000. Now the cost is down to, well, say approximately $2, $2.25 in that range. So it shifted to the right. If you're looking at it horizontally, if you're looking at it vertically, it shifted down. Market supply, here we have three firms, just like we did on the demand side. At $3, firm 1 does 30,000, firm 2, 10,000, firm 3, 25,000. Add them together, 65,000, do the same at 175, here you go. Here's your market supply. If firms go out of business, that will shift market supply to the left. If more firms open up and compete, that'll shift it to the right. So equilibrium is the condition in which quantity supplied, that's 1 point on the supply curve, and quantity demanded, 1 point on the demand curve, are equal. At equilibrium, there's no tendency for price to change. Price will hang out there. At every other point, you're at what's called disequilibrium, and price is going to naturally try to push you back to equilibrium. Now, the first condition is excess demand or shortage. It's a condition where quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied at the current market price. So let me tell you a story. I was living in Dublin, Ireland. I was living and working in Dublin, Ireland at the time. And the euro was really strong against the US dollar. And now I am hard on my computers, and I mean brutally hard. But the euro was so strong, if you needed a new computer, you didn't go buy it in the UK or Ireland. You literally would buy a plane ticket to New York, buy your computer, and fly back. That would actually be usually a little bit cheaper. So I was living in Ireland at the time, but I was back in the United States. I was in the state of Maine, which is the top right corner of the United States for those in need of geographic enhancement. I was in the United States for the Christmas season. I was in Maine. Now, right around Thanksgiving, if you go, I was in Bangor, Maine, home of Stephen King and all these kind of things. Now, if you go to the Bangor Mall, the Walmart, they finally opened a Target, all these places, and you drive there right around Thanksgiving or later, and you just, assuming you find a parking spot, good luck with that, and just walk the rows of cars and look at the number plates, the license plates in the car, you'll find just as many, if not more, Canadian plates than you will U.S. plates. What happens is Canadians, and they even get these huge tour buses, you know, the roving tour buses, the long distance ones that have the bathrooms in the back and everything and the Wi-Fi on it and everything. They pack these tour buses full of Canadians, drive them to Bangor, Maine to go shopping. They spend the night in Maine. Again, I'm glad somebody's spending the night in Maine in the winter in the hotels. And then they go back to Canada. Bangor, Maine is the last major retail stop for pretty much all of northern Maine, good chunk of anything to the east or down east, and then a good part of Atlantic Canada. So anyway, I was back in Maine, and I had to go to Best Buy. Some of you may have been to Best Buy before. And I needed to get some computer memory. I had blown up the memory in my computer, pretty brutal. And so I went to Best Buy, took my computer. I didn't have the electrostatic strap, so I wanted the Geek Squad to install the new memory in my laptop and replace it out, and they were busy doing that. Now, next to the Geek Squad counter, there was the customer service counter. I was just sort of standing there. And the manager walks in carrying 2 boxes and puts them behind the counter. There was a counter behind the customer service counter, a little place for them to work, and he sets them on the counter behind. And I'd never seen those before. And I asked the manager, so what are those boxes? I've never seen those before. And he goes, oh, these are the new Nintendo Wii's. And I'm really upset. And I looked at him and I go, why are you upset? He said, well, these just came in. We're the only ones that have them. And the only one, the closest you can go, you got to go to Boston to get them. And I'm frustrated because I just got the store all sorted out for the holidays. Now I got to take down one of the displays. I got to take out a cabinet. I got to put these in the cabinet because they're too popular. Somebody will steal them. And I got to put them in a cabinet, and there's only 2 of them. And then I got to redo the decorations. It's going to be a lot of work for next to nothing. Oh. Now, just pause for a minute. If you were a school kid that year, what was on your Christmas list? The new Nintendo Wii. If you were the cool parent, what did you have under the Christmas tree that Christmas? A new Nintendo Wii. Let's be clear. If you were one of those kids in school and you had the cool parent, whatever social standing you had before Christmas break, it went way up after. You suddenly found friends you didn't know you had, altruistically, graciously willing to come over and help you test out your Nintendo Wii to make sure it's working right. Right? Looked at the guy. How much are they? And he said, well, we're going to sell them for we have an agreement with Nintendo. We have to sell them at this price. I go, oh, okay. Tell you what, I'll take one. Take them. He goes, oh, you want one? I go, no, I'll take them both. He goes, really? Yeah, I'll save you the effort. You don't have to do the display. I'll take them both. I said, oh, that's cool. Thank you. And I became the owner of the only 2 Nintendo Wii's. Bangor to Boston is about like driving from Salem to Seattle as far as distance, for about that much distance in any direction. And I had the only 2. So I let it be known that I had an infestation of Nintendo Wii's. And mercifully, there were a few people who horribly were afflicted with fat wallet syndrome. So I let them, they helped me with my infestation of Nintendo Wii's, and I helped them with their fat wallet problem. Notice that the price that was being offered quantity demanded. More people wanted Nintendo Wiis than they were able to supply at the time. So what happened? When there is excess demand or shortage in a market without any intervention in it, price tends to go up, and that's what happened. Now, did I value the Nintendo Wii at that price? Yes, bought one later. But I didn't value it the most. So what happened? The people who valued it more than me gave me the cash, I gave them the Wii. Price sorted out who got what in the economy. I got rationed out. I did not get a Nintendo Wii. They got the Nintendo Wii because they valued it the most and were willing to pay. So here we go. At a price of $1.75, quantity demanded, you come across $1.75 until you hit the demand curve is 50,000. Quantity supplied here is 25. So 50,000 minus 25,000 is 25,000, and that is your shortage amount. What happens when you have a shortage? Price tends to move up until you get back to equilibrium. There's another disequilibrium condition on the other side. Now, there's a time of year that I utterly detest going shopping, and it's the Christmas time. Seriously, I hate going shopping Christmas. I walk into Target, Macy's, I walk in almost anywhere, and my eyes are accosted. I am violated by these evil, ugly Christmas sweaters. Seriously, these things are horrible. Oh my God, these things are bad. I can improve the aesthetic quality of these sweaters with a can of spray paint. I mean, if I bought these sweaters and I took them down to where the homeless are here in Salem and I gave it to them, they would look at me and they go, why do you hate me so much? What did I do to you that you would give me something so godforsaken, the dead of winter? And they say, so godforsaken awful like this. Oh, I hate these things. Years ago, I walked into Trader Joe's during Christmas time, and they had a special display up, and I walked right into the door. By the way, there was a person working at Trader Joe's who had been through my class and heard this lecture. Walk right into the door, and what's in front of me? The ugly sweater do-it-yourself cookie kit. Seriously, I'm not even safe at the grocery store. So I grabbed the cookie kit. I walked over to the dude, and I'm holding, and I'm like, really? I'm not even safe here. He saw me. He saw the cookie kit in my hand, doubled over laughing. The entire store is watching. Go, what? This guy's cracking up, literally doubled over laughing. I'm not sure if he fell over, but yeah. Oh, ugly sweaters. Now, there must be a sucker born every, they sell these things for 40, 60 bucks. There must be a sucker born every minute, because I don't understand how the buyers for these stores keep doing this. Because every year after Christmas, the day after Christmas, shockingly, the majority of those sweaters are unsold, and so they mark them down. And the price comes down from 60 to 40 to 20 to 10 to 5 to $1 to 50 cents. Which I still think is overpriced. At a nickel, I might be a buyer. I might buy them and burn them to get some warmth out of it. But beyond that, no. Right? Excess supply. Condition exists when quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded at the current price. The price is 60 bucks. There are more ugly Christmas sweaters, mercifully, than there are stooges buying them. What happens when you have a surplus? Price tends to fall until you reach equilibrium. There we go. Quantity supplied at 65, quantity demanded 25. There's your surplus amount. What happens? Price falls until you get to equilibrium. All right. So here we go. We're going to start right here. Initial price, this is billion pounds of coffee per year. Price per pound of coffee is $1.20. 13.2 billion pounds of coffee for me, or for the world, but let's be clear, I love my coffee. However, there was a freeze that destroyed some of the coffee crop. That shifted the supply curve to the left. That created a shortage. What happened? Equilibrium price increased until we got to $2.40 and 9.9 billion pounds of coffee per year. So I want you to pay attention to the language I'm about to use for this graph. Notice we had a decrease in supply. The old supply curve was blown away. We drew a new one. But we moved along the demand curve. So in this case, a decrease in supply led to a decrease in quantity demanded. The decrease in supply shifted the supply curve to the left. The decrease in quantity demanded, we moved up the curve to the left, so we went from 13.2 to 9.9 billion pounds of coffee. Frequently, guys, a shift of one curve causes movement along the other. A shift of one curve causes movement along the other. So I could be ultra sinister on your test. And I could ask a question that's pretty simple. And it says, what would cause a decrease in quantity demanded? And you go, decrease in quantity demanded. Okay, law of demand, that's your own price. And you look at the answers given, and you go, wait a minute. An increase in known price is not here. Oh, crap, what's the other doing to me? Remember, a shift of one curve can cause movement along the other. So if you're looking for movement in a decrease in quantity demanded, then you're looking for something that can shift a supply curve, because that could cause it. So now you got to look not at the demand shifters, you got to look for supply shifters and find are there any supply shifters there that would shift the supply curve the correct way as to cause a decrease in quantity demanded. So in the extra study questions, I have some examples of those. It's worth your time to go through those before the exam to practice. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Next time we'll be doing Chapter 4, using these to metric efficiency. But thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great day.